Silver is the best investment opportunity I've ever seen in 34 and a half years of business. And I don't think we've seen anything yet. If we can get above 32.50 and close, there's very little resistance between it and 50. And if you realize, to your point, that it's 6 times undervalued historically, well, that only puts it, I believe, at about a 16 to 1 ratio. I think, is that what you're talking about? You could argue that it's 11 or 12 times undervalued if you believe Keith Neumeyer telling us it's coming out of the ground at 7 to 1.
Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Andy Schectman. He's the co-founder and president of Miles Franklin, one of the biggest precious metals dealer in the U.S. Andy, it's great to have you back.
Mario, it's been too long, brother. Thanks for having me. I watch everything you do, and I really appreciate you having me back.
Oh, you're welcome, and thanks for coming back. Andy, I wanted to start asking you about the Chinese, and not to do with BRICS, but with this recent stimulus they've announced. And it's interesting because a few months ago, Janet Yellen went to Beijing and told the Chinese they had to do a stimulus, like give checks to people. And Xi Jinping said, we're not into welfareism, but it looks like the Chinese are like, yeah, they've kind of turned around and followed Yellen's lead, which is not really too encouraging for the yuan, but it is encouraging, I think, for our favorite metals, gold and silver.
I think that all governments, regardless of who they are, choose the path of inflation. It's an easier path than one of austerity. It's an easier path because it keeps the masses at bay until it gets to the point of diminishing returns. So, it doesn't surprise me. It's something that I think you'll find over and over and over again in every culture throughout all of time. Same thing is happening here, but in the end, yes, it may not be the best thing for the Chinese economy, but look, I think that this is something that the Chinese economy is one that is maybe have its own set of problems, but the level of asset base that they have, the relationships that they're striking all around the world in natural resources, to me, will allow them to weather the storm far greater than the United States, who is sitting upon a mountain of debt and a diminished asset base. And the majority of the assets that are still in the West are being slowly siphoned away by countries like China. So, yes, it's another piece of the puzzle. But honestly, Mario, it's not one that gets me too concerned ultimately for where China is going, because I think the bottom of their base, the bottom of their financial pyramid, is far more stable than people give credit for.
Yes, officially the PBOC has just over 2,000 metric tons of gold, but there are a lot of analysts out there in the precious metal space who think they have at least 30,000. And if you include the Chinese people, I think the public there has 25,000 metric tons. And so, yeah, it is a little bit inflationary what they did. But like you said, they have a much better financial base, I think, than the U.S.
Well, Mario, when the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, accumulates metal, they don't have to tell the IMF. When they're accumulating metal through a proxy bank on behalf of the PBOC, buying directly from the refineries in South Africa or Switzerland, they're not reporting to the IMF. When they're buying gold that is under 995 pure, it's not being reported to the IMF. We saw Saudi Arabia the other day try and hide their acquisition. China has been hiding it all along. They produce between 300 and 500 metric tons a year. We never talk about that. My whole career, everyone always said China's numbers are ridiculous, that they're not, they stayed at around 1,200 tons for years, didn't reflect any of the increase, whether it be in domestic mining production or any import numbers. And they want us to believe, just because of a couple of months of them supposedly stopping reporting, which was nonsense because the import export numbers that were in London painted a different picture. But all I'm simply saying is that I would err on Alistair McLeod's side you're right. To his point, to your point, he says that they have somewhere in the neighborhood of 40,000 metric tons, 18 to 20 by the people, 18 to 20 plus by the state. And I would agree with that. And I did an interview recently with Sean Kuhn and Dolly Varden Silver, and he had confirmed what I had heard from other mining execs that China, which is, I don't think a lot of people even know, the second largest producer of silver in the world, are flying around all around Latin America, buying up doré and concentrate. And for folks who don't know what doré is, it's a crudely refined bar that's maybe 60, 70% at best refined. The miners will refine it to that level and then send it into the refining company to further purify it. But China's flying around paying an exceedingly high premium to what the West will, buying the concentrate, which is like a sludge, and buying the doré bar at a much higher price in the West, shipping it back to China and having it refined, which again masks the amount that they're buying. It's not purchased off of an exchange. And so they're going to great levels, I think, to accumulate and produce and not tell the world just how much gold that they have. And if you realize that there's a high probability that down the road, gold will be part of a new system, it will be pegged in some degree, whether it be the unit settlement currency or just the very plain fact that the IMF and the BIS look at gold differently than they once did. I think gold has a role in where it's going. It wouldn't be to anyone's advantage to let, hey, this is how much we really have, any more so than, the Fed or the US government auditing Fort Knox and being open and forthright about it, as it's been shot down a few times when Ron Paul tried to have it audited, and it hasn't been audited since 53. And I would ask the question, where did Saddam Hussein's gold go? Where did Gaddafi's gold go? And where did the 12 billion in gold that the Ukraine sold to fund their war, where did that go? Do we have it? So there's a lot of opaque coverings, if you will, over the metals market. And I don't think it changes anytime soon, but I would simply say that China has far, far, far more than they report. And I think that is for sure.
Yes, and we're speaking here at the end of the third quarter, going to October. And of course, in the US, you have the elections, which we've been waiting forever, it seems. But I wanted to touch upon, before we look at the US, the BRICS Summit coming up just maybe a couple of weeks before the election, and how you see this summit, and how significant you think it's going to be for gold and silver. And you just mentioned there earlier the unit. Maybe you could tell the viewers what the unit is, and what you see happening in the summit will be in Kazan, Russia, from the 22nd to the 24th of October.
Yeah, I think it's a really massive deal. Before I do that, I would like to kind of, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to kind of draw a narrative and see if it makes sense. One of the things that I've talked about with you before over the years is how things unfolded back in the day. Well, in fact, you know what? Let's just skip that, because I don't want to go down that road. But let me just simply say this, that yes, I believe it will have a significant effect. Let's go back to a meeting in Johannesburg, in St. Petersburg, that coincided with the G7 meeting. Let's start there. This was just a few months or a few weeks ago, really, a month and a half ago, the G7 meeting that was in Italy. The Royal Crown Prince was invited to the G7 meeting of Saudi Arabia, that is. He was invited to the G7 meeting and he turned it down. He said, no, thank you, I have other obligations. But then he sent his finance ministers to the meeting in Novograd. And a few things came out of that meeting that I take particular note of. Now, one of the reasons that I have been saying for almost 4 years that they would issue a commodity-backed currency. Now, it's not a BRICS currency, as everyone originally thought. Everyone thought it would be a BRICS currency, but that's not what it's going to be. It's a settlement currency. But anyways, one of the reasons that I said that was because of a man named Sergei Glaziev, who for 4 years has been talking about this is the ultimate pathway for the BRICS, a currency that will be pegged to a basket of commodities and pegged to a basket of currencies. And so that's kind of been my driving force. I've followed him very closely. So out of this meeting in St. Petersburg, a couple things came out that are very noteworthy. Number one, we understand that 59 countries have formally applied. I don't know how many are going to show up or how many of them are going to be admitted, but I can tell you that 59 formally applied. That is what we were told by Dilma Rousseff. Dilma Rousseff is the former president of Brazil. Dilma Rousseff is the head of the BRICS New Development Bank. This is no small fry. Dilma came out and said that she had two meetings on the sidelines at the BRICS meeting in Novograd with Sergei Glaziev and Vladimir Putin, and that in principle they have agreed to a new settlement currency called the unit, which will be traded over Project Bridge. Now let's start with Project Bridge. We've talked about Project Bridge for over a year now. It's a cross-border payment system that uses central bank digital currencies to trade back and forth with one another outside the purview of the SWIFT system. And I find it interesting that the first two trades that they did, call it test trades, were done between China and the United Arab Emirates using digital yuan to purchase gold and oil from the UAE. And I would argue that gold and oil have been remonetized globally, that they are far more valuable than the currencies that are used to purchase them. It's kind of like Iran awarding China a very large contract to remodernize their largest airport, and they're paying for it in oil. It's no different than China buying corn and soybeans in digital yuan through Brazil, who then takes those yuan, sends them back to China, and immediately converts it into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Gold and oil are taking a different role. Anyways, the four participants that have stood behind or developed Project Bridge are China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates, backed by the Bank of International Settlements. Oops, sorry about that. Didn't mean to knock that. The same bank that has changed their viewpoint on gold and whether the dynamics have it as a tier one asset or a high quality liquid asset. They look at it very, very, very differently. And so in any case, Saudi Arabia has just become a full participant in Project Bridge, which is a very big development. There's about 25 other countries that are observational in Bridge, and Saudi Arabia, the fifth country, to be a full participant. It's important to note that US dollars are not compatible with Bridge. Bridge will allow countries to trade back and forth their own CBDCs. So if I want to buy something from China, I can send them my digital ruble if I'm in Russia, or my digital rupee if I'm in India, and I can trade back and forth with them over Bridge and not be affected by the SWIFT system. Okay, fine. That's important to note. So that denotes, number one, that each one of these countries will have to maintain a integrity within their monetary system, take very good care of their own monetary system, not worrying about the conversion into dollars and how all of that works. Just focus on your own ecosystem, the stewardship, if you will, of and maintaining a stable economy within your own ecosystem. But the second part of it, that she said, in principle, we've agreed to the new settlement currency, not a unified currency, but a settlement currency called the unit. And the unit will be backed by 40% gold bars in kilo fashion and 60% a basket of BRICS plus currencies with not more than any 30% domination, if you will, in any one currency in that basket. And it gets a little bit deeper here, which I'll get to in a second, regarding possession and whatnot. But this is a big deal. She says, look, we've agreed in principle to this in our two meetings, and we will have a meeting right now this week, I believe, in China to talk about it with the intention of rolling it out perhaps in the big meeting on the 22nd in Kazan. You're right. One of the things that I find very interesting about the unit ecosystem, I will underscore with a simple Google search, which I did recently. All right, so one of the things I wanted to show you regarding the unit and the gold centers around what we've seen recently out of the Bank of England and the New York Fed. Now, it's important to understand that countries kept their gold traditionally in these two locations. You have the Western jurisdiction and the Western rule of law. They would leave their gold at the Bank of England for direct access to the LBMA. They would leave their gold at the New York Fed for direct access to the COMEX. And it's been this way for a very long time. So over the last year and a half, just a simple Google search showed me this: Germany, Austria, Slovakia, Argentina, the Netherlands, Saudi Arabia, Hungary, Belgium, Egypt, Senegal, Romania, Nigeria, Poland, Ghana, India, Turkey, France, Serbia, Venezuela, Algeria, Cameroon, South Africa, Czechoslovakia, to name a few, and others, have all repatriated their gold from the Bank of England and the New York Fed. India is a good example. In the first 4 months of this year, they bought more gold than they did all of last year, which was a very big year for them. And they repatriated it all, brought it home, along with 100 metric tons that they've held at the New York Fed. Now, the easy answer, Mario, for that is, well, it's the weaponization of the Western markets, whether it be the euro or the dollar, where we can steal. And steal we did, not sanction. We stole 5 billion in Russian assets, and we used it largely to purchase weapons on behalf of the Ukraine to give to them in the midst of a war against the country we stole them from. This is a line that's very difficult to ever come back from. And so I'm sure a large portion of the motivation behind these countries, look at Venezuela. They asked the Bank of England, can we have our gold back? No. And so holding your own metal, certainly the removal of counterparty risk in an environment where governments in the West are going far beyond just sanctioning, in fact, outright theft. That's what it is. It's default. And taking assets when we're viewed wholly hypocritically, where Janet Yellen can say to CNN a few months ago, look, we're okay with Xi Jinping and Putin being buddies in BRICS. And I'm thinking, well, geez, that's pretty swell of you, Madam Secretary. But if Xi gives one penny to Putin's war machine, we'll sanction Xi's banks, companies, and Beijing itself. Never mind the 200 billion we've given to the Ukraine with no congressional oversight, and the Stinger missiles and the F-16s and all of these things that make the world say, geez, these people are hypocritical. And why would I want to hold their assets in an inflated currency that can be weaponized? Anyways, that's the easy answer. But if you Google and look at the white paper on the unit, you see something really very interesting. And that is that it says that the gold and the currency that will be used to make these unit tokens, which will trade over Enbridge, which Saudi Arabia is a full participant in, the dollar is not compatible with, will be held within the borders of the countries that possess it, put into escrow accounts, and independently and continuously audited. In other words, these countries will not need to send their gold to Beijing. They will not need to send their gold to Moscow. They will not need to send their gold to Dubai. They will hold it themselves. They will have it continuously audited. They will put things into escrow accounts that comprise the unit tokens. And then that unit token will be able to be traded freely amongst one another across Enbridge and deliverable upon demand. So Enbridge allows everyone to maintain their own monetary ecosystem, to trade their CBDCs. And because it will be 60% included as the comprising the currency portion of the unit token, it will demand proper stewardship of the economy. It will demand keeping your monetary and fiscal house in order, unlike here in the West. But the key to it, above it all, is that if indeed I have enough digital yuan, thank you very much, or I have enough rupee or enough ruble, I would like to have the settlement currency in the unit, and I'd like to stand for delivery on that too, please. Well, here you go. And so it allows this to be completely voluntary in terms of it's not a common currency, it's a common settlement currency, but it also maintains that you have to keep your house in order. So I think it's a very big deal. And I think if indeed they come out and announce that we've decided to ratify this, it's really lit a fuse upon the Western system that will be tough to put out. I guess we'll have to see how it ultimately plays out in the next 3 weeks. But to hear the former president of Brazil and the head of the Bank of the BRICS Development Bank say we've agreed in principle to this is something that should not be underestimated or taken lightly.
Yes, and you said that Enbridge, of course, is created by the BIS, which Bank for International Settlements. And they were founded by major Western central banks, not the Fed at the time, because the Fed was not part of the League of Nations deal. So they had banks like JP Morgan, First Citibank. They were the founders of the BIS. So could you see eventually, depending on the on the who wins the election, that the U.S. will start dealing in this unit. I could see that happening. I'm sure the U.S. is probably gonna try to stay away from it as long as possible because it will mean giving up sovereignty. So maybe
Well,
you could answer that and also talk about the election and how do you think whoever wins, how they will deal with this problem?
Well, you have Project Agora in the West, which is their answer to it, in my opinion. It's the IMF's answer to it. It's very similar in theory, which would certainly be accessible or compatible with Enbridge. And you have the head of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, who says a CBDC not pegged to something is simply fiat. And before that, earlier in 2023, the IMF put out a report saying gold is gold as an international reserve currency comma, a barbarous relic no more, question mark. So I think indeed, if the West were going to challenge or try and create something compatible with that would be able to integrate with, and that's one of the things with Enbridge, it is touted to be highly compatible with other ecosystems if they want to let it in. That would be Project Agora. So I think, yes, I could see that happening. Maybe not at first, as a direct participant, but certainly having the ability to access it through Project Agora. As far as the election is concerned, I don't think the only reason that I want, first of all, I guess I'll simply say this. The current administration, in my mind, has done more to damage this country than any external foe could have ever done in the last 4 years. And I think neither candidate has really what it takes to rectify these problems. Now, Trump comes out and talks about, paying off the debt, and he says it in very cryptic ways that there's gold underneath our feet. Now, I don't know if he's talking about real gold or if he's talking about oil and drilling and using that to pay off the debt, the $35 trillion debt. That doesn't even speak to the unfunded liabilities of nearly 200 trillion. But look, to me, the reason that I think it's imperative that Trump wins is less for what he can do economically. I think we're very far down a road where, look, this is a guy, his VP says, well, maybe being the world reserve currency isn't the best thing in the world. Well, that's the same rhetoric coming out of knucklehead Jared Bernstein's mouth, who is the lead economic advisor of the US government, advocates for losing the world reserve currency. Trump advocates for very low interest rates and a weak dollar. That is not recipe for success long term. It just creates and exacerbates the problems we already have and the inflation spigot. But to me, what I think is super important is the lack of integrity in this country that we find, at least globally. People look at this country like, what the hell's happened? What's going on with the lawlessness in their cities? Are their elections fair? Is their judicial system two-tiered? Why is it that we're moving to a system that is you're measured by your lifestyle rather than by your merit? What's happened to the nuclear family? What is going on in this country? The things that made this country special, and not to mention letting 20 million people in this country illegally. If 5% have bad intentions, that's a million people. That's a standing army. I think that the need for law and order and for respect of institution is massively important. And to me, it's part of the whole big picture. In fact, if putting all of our financial ills aside, even the weaponization of the dollar, if everyone still wanted to come to this country, emulated it, thought it had the highest level of integrity in every respect, immigration, elections, judicial system, you didn't have to worry about walking a major city after dark. All of these things that all of a sudden have happened that make people say, what the hell's going on to that great country? It would be far easier, even as divided as we are as a country, to fix these problems. I think that's why Trump needs to get reelected, because this current administration's pathway, I think, is one that leads to great problems, far greater than what is directly in front of us. So I guess we'll see. But me personally, I don't think Trump has what it takes to fix the economic problems with his policies. But I do think he can at least turn the ship around in terms of the way that we are viewed on the global scale and get us again focused on American ideals that help make this country not only one of the greatest in the history of the world, but also an envy of much of the world. And right now, I think we're kind of being laughed at.
Yes, and over here in the UK, pretty much the same.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah, we're just a mini me of the US, and I don't see the current government really doing anything that will help the economy grow. They're relying on bringing in more socialism, more government interference. So I don't see the debt situations improving. And even if Trump even if he was a perfect candidate, dealing with the debt situation is something that I think we've gone way past it, Andy. This insurmountable fiat currency that it's been building up for over 50 years since Nixon closed the gold window. So I think the best thing that could happen, not just to the US, but the UK, would be for the whole system to implode. And if that were to happen, I think Trump would deal with it much in a much better fashion than the people who are in charge now. Is that the way you feel about
That's
it?
100% exactly how I feel.
Yeah, so we didn't touch upon silver. What do you see in silver? Because gold, as we speak here, is near 2,700. Silver is just around $32 dollars. I would say it's like six times undervalued if you look at the historic gold to silver ratio. And yeah, it feels like despite all the shortage of silver that there is out there, the imbalance of production that somehow the bullion banks and yeah, they still manage to keep it suppressed. Yeah, and maybe tell us what you're seeing in terms of the premiums and the interest. It feels, Andy, like gold and silver are doing really well this year, up about 30% or so. But there's not a peep about it in the mainstream media.
Yeah, well, look, you see India's imports increased from 560 tons last year in the first 6 months, which was a massive year for them, up to 4,554 tons so far in 2024 in the first 6 months. That's a sevenfold increase over last year. You see China flying around, as I mentioned, buying up all the concentrate in the doré in unrefined fashion from the Latin American miners and sending it back to China to have it refined and taken off of the the marketplace in a very opaque way. You're seeing metal on the London Metals Exchange trading right now. They admit to trading 290 million ounces a day, but admit that on the LBMA that those numbers are 10 times understated, which means they're trading as much as 2.9 billion ounces of silver per day, or 3.5 times annual global mine supply. This is quite an effort to keep the price held down. At the same time, the biggest money in the world is going all around the globe, buying all that they can, importing all that they can. Um, and I find it interesting that, we're going to have another structural deficit over 200 million ounces between supply and demand, mine supply and demand. And again, you're talking about not a peep. Yeah, there isn't a peep, but can I share my screen with you by chance? I want to show you
Yeah, sure.
something.
Hold on a second. Let me,
I
yeah,
want to show you
go ahead.
something that I think is one of the reasons why we are seeing what we are with silver. So let me share this here real quick. Can you see that?
Yeah, it's coming up. Yeah,
Okay.
there we go.
Okay. So this my buddy John Little is a heck of a researcher, and I owe a lot of this information to him. But take a look here. This was, if you Google this, you'll see S.2768, October 14th, 1942. A bill to authorize the use for war purposes of silver held or owned by the United States. And just this first paragraph, the present consumption of silver for war purposes is at the rate of about 100 million ounces a year and is growing rapidly. According to the War Production Board, it is only a matter of months before war demands will increase sufficiently to require at least 200 million ounces of silver per year. That was in 1942. Now, before I go on to the next three slides, I want to show you, and then I'll stop sharing. I gave a presentation 2 years ago at Jay Martin's Vancouver Resource Investment Conference where I said there's roughly 500 ounces in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile of silver. And a man came up to me after the presentation. He says, I work for the Department of Defense. He says, I helped design the Patriot missile and the Tomahawk. He says, I think there is silver in it. I just don't know how much. I'll get back to you. Great. Never heard from him again. I go back this year in January, earlier this year, and I gave a different speech, and there he was with a bunch of pictures in his hand. Said, listen, this is all declassified. Don't worry. He was showing me how they had a challenge of shooting the Tomahawk vertically. It was originally designed to come out of a torpedo tube and all sorts of stuff. He says, you know what? You're right. There's between 13 and 14 kilograms in the tip of a Tomahawk. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. I'm glad it was validated. And in all of this high-tech weaponry and aerospace, stealth fighters, and all of the missiles that are used that have guidance systems in them, silver is needed. And so this is 1942. They say we need up to 200 million ounces. Well, look at this. This is the numbers out of the Silver Institute. Here are the demand numbers. Here's the 265 million shortfall, and here are the demand numbers. Industrial, 9%. Electrical and electronics, 9%, of which photovoltaics, that's solar panels, 20%. Brazing, alloy, and solders, 3%. Other industrial, 9%. Photography, -3%. Jewelry, 4%. Silverware, 7%. Well, where the hell is military? Now, this is the smoking gun. Ready? Look at this. This is COMEX. The red represents the big four commercial banks. Let's just call it, I don't know who they would be, Bank of America, Citi, JP, and Goldman. Let's just pretend. The green are the next four biggest: HSBC, Deutsche Bank, Standard Chartered, and Citi. Now you got 8 banks. These are the 8 commercial banks, and this is the short position on COMEX. Look at oil right down here. Remember when they made it -40 a barrel? This is the concentrated short position by the biggest 8 commercial banks on COMEX to the largest degree of any commodity ever traded. It's being shorted and suppressed by 8 banks. And this is a current chart from Gold Charts R Us. And ask yourself, why the hell would 8 Western banks be stepping on the price of silver to this degree, concentrated to the degree of more than any commodity ever traded in the history of the COMEX market? 8 banks in silver. And this is what is happening as a result of it. Here's the LBMA. They have 800 million ounces, right? 800 million ounces of which 500 belong to the ETF. So they have 300 million ounces. They admit to trading 292 million ounces a day, which is 10 times understated by their own admission. 2.9 billion. They're trading 10 times the float. Now, here's the crazy thing. In the month of August, 8.1% of that float, 25 million ounces, were delivered off of the LBMA. How many more months can we see massive deliveries? I'll stop sharing. But what I want to get across in all of this, Mario, in my opinion, is that why the hell would 8 Western banks be stepping on the price of silver to that degree? Because they need it to make weapons. And this military industrial complex is a whole hell of a lot more powerful and probably running the country to a greater degree than is our current president. And they're the ones pulling the strings. So if you allow 8 banks to suppress the price in order to make weapons, well, that's a problem, but it never was a problem. Why wasn't it a problem? Because if you go back throughout my whole career since 1989, none of these entities across the globe ever stood for delivery. On COMEX, it represented 1% or less of contracts, and on the LBMA, it really never happened. It is something you can do, but these countries, 140-year-old LBMA and the COMEX in 74, most of these countries, the entire lifespan of both of these exchanges have been third world nearly. They haven't been sophisticated, coordinated, and motivated enough to stand for delivery, but they are beating us at our own game. They're beating us because they understand the significance of silver, that it should not be industrial, it should be strategic. You have a big movement in Canada trying to move it to that classification as strategic. You need it in so many of these applications. Why would 8 banks be stupid as a mud wall in a rainstorm trying to hold down the price when countries like China are going all around the world buying concentrate and doré, when India is buying 800 million ounces over the last 2 years? These are really important things to consider. And I think what you're witnessing right now here is these countries are wise to what the West is doing. It's similar to the new foundation of the BRICS grain exchange. In it, the gentleman who's running it said, look, we produce and consume more wheat than the West does, yet we don't have a chance to have any say in the pricing of it. That's done on COMEX. But with the development of this new exchange, that will change. They know what we're doing on all of the world's commodities, and they're beating us at our own game because of the ability to stand for delivery. They're standing for delivery, where 8.1% of the entire float in London is delivered in the month of August. They are basically saying, we'll beat you at your own game without firing missiles. We'll just stand for delivery. So I would simply say silver is the best investment opportunity I've ever seen in 34 and a half years of business. And I don't think we've seen anything yet. If we can get above 32.50 and close, there's very little resistance between it and 50. And if you realize, to your point, that it's 6 times undervalued historically, well, that only puts it, I believe, at about a 16-to-1 ratio. I think, is that what you're talking about? You could argue that it's 11 or 12 times undervalued if you believe Keith Neumeyer telling us it's coming out of the ground at 7-to-1. Any way you look at it, you have an asset that is massively undervalued historically and geologically, that is seeing a massive expansion in uses in green and digital, ignoring the fact that military uses have a significant implication and are not recorded or reported. And yet you have stupidity of 8 banks trying to suppress its price when very sophisticated central banks are saying, thank you very much, we'll stand for delivery. So I don't think I've ever seen a better place. Decreasing supply above ground and below, increasing demand, and an artificial price that is distorting its historical and geological price ratio. I don't know if there's a better investment on the planet. And I mean that as God is my witness.
It seems really stupid, actually, for lack of a better word, that
Yeah, no, that is a good word.
they keep the price down like this because they know the government knows it's important for the military and munitions and everything. But at the same time, they're allowing their supposed enemies, China, maybe not India, but Russia, to get cheap silver.
Well,
Uh,
and over the past 4 or 5 months, the cumulative volume on the Shanghai Metals Exchange and the futures exchange cumulative has increased almost 400%, and it has now surpassed the volume on COMEX. It is now the second most heavily traded market commodity exchange on the planet. It's becoming real, and I think at some point when they drain the exchanges to the point where no one's going to deliver at these prices. I mean, China's priced silver as much as $3.50, $4 higher than the Western price for the better part of 6 months or longer. That is the price. Well, what happens if all of a sudden the West is not really going to want to deliver anymore at these prices, make good on these prices? You'll see a movement, I believe, to Shanghai, to Dubai, to Moscow, the real exchanges where these countries produce more, accumulate more, understand it more, and they'll set the price free. The only reason they're not bitching right now about the suppression is that they're the ones accumulating it all and using the suppression against us. It is stupid. That's a good word, because this is how they beat us at our own game. And if we don't allow them to stand for delivery, then the markets are immediately exposed as being fugazi. It's just like Bernie Madoff. Everyone clamored to get in with Bernie until they realized that those trying to liquidate were having a problem. Then everyone ran to liquidate. That's when it changed. So same thing here is that, yeah, the COMEX and the LBMA have this great prestige that is eroding. The rest of the world already understands that this fractionally reserved deal, where if you can trade 3.5 times annual global mine supply every day, most of it, over 90+% of it, in paper promises by commercial banks that are just wealthy enough, deep pocketed enough to paint their own picture that they want or create their own reality. It's not so easy to do that when you're talking sovereign nations who have just as deep of pockets.
And Andy, I'm not sure what the numbers are, but NATO, the West is sending so much military stuff to Ukraine. You kind of wonder how much ammunition and everything we've wasted, not
Right?
wasted, but sent it to them, and how much we have to rebuild, and how much silver we'll need. And I think, unfortunately, like the West has been doing everything wrong, this is going to backfire, and it's going to be when silver starts going up, they're going to be desperate to buy silver at any price, I think.
That's the point. And that explains why you have eight stupid, I like your word, stupid Western banks, commercial banks suppressing the price to maintain the illusion that silver is just a pet rock, no reason to buy it. But if you need it to make high-tech weapons and the military industrial complex is in the business of war and they're the ones pulling the strings, yeah, absolutely. It's the only logical explanation. You take it out of the supply demand numbers. You had Senate subcommittee meetings in 42 saying you need 200 million ounces for it. You take it out of the numbers, you have a structural deficit. And why the hell in this tiny little market would eight banks have the largest concentrated short position in any commodity traded? This is exactly why. It's because it's make believe price in order to appease and continue to enrich the military industrial complex and their warmongering. It's the only explanation that I come up with. But to me, what it really says is that you can only manipulate a market over an extended period of time and push it in the direction it's going. This will end badly the way all manipulations do. The way all manipulations do.
Great, Andy. And yeah, maybe you could tell the viewers how they can contact you. I do have an affiliation with you for precious metals, and you usually have specials every week.
I
I think
do.
the number is 1-800-822-8080.
That's a good memory.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And info at milesfranklin.com for our special price list for your listeners. We
Yeah.
don't publish it. We keep it close to the vest. It'll be as competitive as any in the
Yeah.
country. And by the way, Mario, I did just start my own channel as well, that I've had dormant for a while. We're up to 23,000 subscribers, so we're getting there. And guess who's going to get an invitation to come on my show? His name is Mario, and I'm going to send that out to you. That you can go to the Miles Franklin channel. It's called Little by Little with Andy Schectman. I will love to have you as a guest heading into the end of the year and into the new year. Please be on the lookout for that. But certainly people can reach out to us, info at milesfranklin.com, request the price sheet, say Mario sent me or you saw us on this show. You won't be disappointed in the prices that we give you or any questions that you have. If you want to be contacted, put your phone number. This would be for North America. Unfortunately, we're not able to deliver to the UK. I know you have a UK affiliate you've worked with for a long time. I'm sure that they're fantastic in the United States. We'd love, 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 love to work with your listeners. And I love coming on with you and I love watching you and the way that you do things, the way that you conduct yourself. I do have one question to ask you before we head out. On my walk this morning, I listened to Rafi Farber's interview about perhaps Israel making illegal the ownership of gold and silver. Now it hasn't even made it as far as the law process yet. It's only a recommendation, and evidently the Bank of Israel is against it. From your research, and I know you've talked about it, is this something that you think is a possibility, or is this something that's just being floated out there? Do you expect to see other countries try and enact some form of controls over things like precious metals and cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, I spoke about it recently because I saw Rafi tweeting it out about 10 days ago, and I thought that was quite serious. But from what Rafi has told me in the past, precious metals ownership is not a big thing in Israel. So I'm not sure. But I think we can't discount anything because the world is going so crazy. And the only positive that I see. Well, the positive that I see is that not many of us proportionally have gold and silver. And Clive Thompson, who you know of, he thinks if they come for the gold and silver, they'll go after the ETFs, which would make
I
it a
think that's
lot
what they do
easier.
in the United States too. You
Yeah,
got JP Morgan as the custodian of the world's largest silver trust, and after paying a $920 million fine to the Justice Department for manipulating the market, it would be much easier for them to come in and take SLV and GLD, the largest stockpile of silver, fourth or fifth largest of gold, and
yeah.
look the world in the face and say, "What? We didn't enact, we didn't break any laws or infringe any civil liberties." But I think that I think he's right. I think he's a smart man, and I would like to hope that's the case too, because you know, well, I guess desperate governments do desperate things, but I've always felt that the ETFs are the target. You have JP Morgan and BlackRock as the custodian of SLV, and JP Morgan and I think HSBC Bank behind GLD. They could come in on a Friday night, take that, which the prospectus gives them the right to do, be sitting on these huge stockpiles without going door to door, without risking the global backlash, and say, "What? We didn't do anything wrong. We didn't break any laws." So I guess only time will tell. Thanks for answering that, Mario. You're one of the greatest guys in this industry. Keep doing what you're doing. It's great to be here with you. I really enjoy our time, and I look forward to doing it again. And you're coming on my show next.
Thank you. And for the viewers, yeah, I've seen your videos pop up on YouTube now. So yeah, Andy means he's got a new channel on YouTube. So go and check it out. I'm gonna put it up in the cards here, his YouTube channel. And yes, thank you, Andy. And hit him straight later on today.
I sure will. I sure will, my brother. Thank you, Mario. One of these days, you're going to come to Florida. It's getting to be winter time in the UK, and you can come to Florida, and you and I can play golf here. I got plenty of bedrooms for you, so come on down. Bring your family, bring the dog, and love to see you in person.
Great. Thank you, and take care.
You too, brother.